Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is November 12th, 2020, and we're up to episode 119 of Transmission.
And I have a new co-host today.
Yeah, call me Babyface McGee. I shave from time to time, and it always shocks people. It does take the years off with my smooth, round baby face.
You look so clean and shiny.
But have no fear, I'm still the same person who was here yesterday. I'm Mark Van Stunek. I'm the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Daniel Wolpert. I direct Mike at the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing. And
there's some shock. Gus is shocked.
Yes, Gus is shocked.
You had a long beard. Didn't you shave down your beard recently? So that was more shocking than this. So
yeah. All right. Well, this isn't our topic for today, but today is a special day. It's a special day in the history of the United States because today Doctors Without Borders announced that they are coming here to help with the pandemic. So today we officially become a shithole country. Kind of exciting.
This is where it's fun to read those reports written about the United States the way we write reports about third world countries.
Right, exactly.
Amidst partisan strife and plague, Doctors Without Borders has entered the nation despite protestations of the tyrant Donald Trump.
Yeah. So, but anyway, we're not going to talk about that today. No, maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Well, and just to throw out the other piece, so we talked about the boohoo d'etat earlier, but it's getting more serious because Trump has been replacing the civilian oversight of the military with his loyalists, which maybe we'll have to talk about that. Hopefully we don't have to talk about that. Hopefully Trump will start crying. He'll have an Ebenezer Scrooge moment and just say, "I'm sorry, everyone," and go away. That'd be nice.
So that's great. So Patricia is helping to pay for American health care. Thank you, Patricia.
Today we're going to pivot from talking about Trump to talking about Biden, which it's hard. We have to walk and chew gum at the same time as the American people because we have to pressure Trump while also still challenging Biden because we can't just assume let's just take our eyes off Biden and trust him to do everything good for everybody. He has to be challenged too, but without delegitimizing him. So there's some complexity in this time, but we have to start thinking about what does it mean to hold his feet to the fire, which is a term that I heard a lot when people are trying to make sure, because I'm a radical anarchist type. I didn't know if I was going to vote for some crazy third party person. I want to make sure that I fell in line. And so people told me no, right now the most important thing is stopping Trump, and then after that we can hold Biden's feet to the fire.
Right. So this was a line that became very popular once it became clear that Biden was going to be the Democratic nominee. Was basically hey, look, we started with this incredible group of diverse people for running for president, some of whom were radical, and guess what? We ended up with the old middle of the road white guy. And so, folks knew that a lot of people like Mark and I would be extremely unhappy with this. And so they immediately start saying, oh, well, it's okay. It's okay. Right. First of all, Trump is Satan, so we've got to get rid of Satan, which, is kind of true. But that's not all. You also get as a bonus prize for your vote that we're going to hold Biden's feet to the fire. And he really is going to be slightly more to the left than he has been his whole life. And of course, the GOP tried to make a lot of this. I mean, they took it more seriously than most Democrats, right? Suddenly Biden became this raving leftist socialist, which is totally hilarious.
I mean,
And
it would be
now,
amazing if everything the Republicans said about Biden were true. That would
yeah,
be
that
so
would be
beautiful.
great.
Into supporting Black Lives Matter, defunding the police, a socialist, universal health care, taking away guns. Like, I'd be okay with most of that stuff.
Right.
I mean,
Take
away the guns from white conservatives first, and then work your way over.
But of course, none of that is true. Biden is not any of those things.
Middle of the road white guy who's a neoliberal and creepy.
Yep. Yeah.
It's like being said, hey, we're going to go to a concert, and there's all these concerts in town, but then you keep driving, and all of a sudden you're taken to a casino where Foreigner and Survivor are playing a concert. That's what it feels like. We could have gone to all these other concerts. We're going to one of those casino prog rock
and
concerts.
we're listening to, we're going to go see the Bee Gees revival.
Which is because Gibbs, the main guy, died. So that's exactly that. Biden is like Bee Gees without Gibbs. That's kind of perfect metaphor.
So anyway, so now he's president-elect, and so we're starting to hear about cabinet positions. We're starting to hear about policies, and guess what? We can't do anything radical. We can't do anything radical. Oh my gosh, it's already happening. So his feet are firmly in asbestos boots, far away from the fire. And, he suddenly his feet are immune to fire automatically.
Well, there's all kinds of things wrong. This is all predictable. Things like they were trying to challenge Pelosi. And at first I was like, yay, let's have a different Speaker of the House. But then I find out it's because she's too far to the left. The Democratic Party is trying to distance itself now. Like months ago, they wanted to leverage Black Lives Matter and all these movements of tearing down statues and stuff because it added pressure to Trump. Now that Trump is hopefully moving out of the picture, we have to throw that stuff under the bus and start reaching across the aisle to bring healing to a war-torn nation, like that kind of like post-Civil War kind of talk. And it really doesn't serve any real purpose because, I mean, if Biden is, he's a centrist, he's a corporate guy. There are no bones being thrown. The guy he's choosing for his chief of staff is like a former Wall Street guy. It's all predictable.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but it actually, I mean, the quote "reaching across the aisle" is serving a purpose, not the purpose that they're pretending.
Yes.
I mean, the purpose that it's serving is maintaining the corporate status quo, right? That's the purpose that it's serving. And again, all the different excuses like, oh, well, McConnell's, the Republicans are still going to have the Senate. Oh, we can't really do anything. His agenda has to be middle of the road. Americans are more happy when everything's status quo. I mean, all these things. And the guy hasn't even been inaugurated yet. And we're hearing all this kind of stuff. All right. Some comments
popping up. CK writes, do you think the squad will hold his feet to the fire?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a minute. I mean, there is one leverage point, but already it's being beat on. But yeah, let's circle back to that.
Yeah, let's do that. Anthony writes, nationalize ice cream production and hold them hostage. I like the way you think. Let's nationalize
that's
other
good.
vital industries besides ice cream, but also that.
Socialists for ice cream, we could call that.
We can have when the Ben & Jerry's people, like the ice cream czars. Series writes, holding feet to the fire is easier and more effective regarding congressfolk and city council than a president, but we are still unwilling to acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the issues that with our system, like, before we started, we were talking about parliamentary systems, where it's easier those things are wrapped together, but we don't have that kind of system. Philip writes, isn't this all just short-term hedging for the January Senate runoff? I don't believe so.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is some of that, I think, particularly, but it's much more on the GOP side, right? I mean, I do think that part of the Republican strategy of, going easy on Trump here is that they are trying to prevent the serious Trumpites from being mad and then not voting in the Georgia runoff. Look, on the Democratic side, if you look at the Georgia electorate, why is it that Biden has won Georgia? It's because Stacey Abrams got out the black vote. Stacey Abrams and all the people that worked with her organization. And so it is the black vote who really wants and needs these more progressive policies that are the ones that are going to help the Democrats. And so that's the other piece to this, is that, everybody's talking about what an abusive relationship Trump has with all his supporters. But I think we need to look at the abusive relationship that the Democratic Party has with people of color.
Yes.
Because they are constantly saying to them, "Oh, we've got your back," right? I mean, Biden said that in his acceptance speech. Thank you for the African American vote.
Thank you for having my back. I have your back.
I have your back. Okay, where are the policies? Where are the policies that have your back? And
not only that, this is why we should be really skeptical of that, because he didn't say, "I will have your back." He made it sound like he's always had their back. Right. And we know what that looks like. So if we're expecting more of the same, then, well, it's a big FU to the Black community, to Black Lives Matter, to the whole police, the police pressure against the police and all this stuff.
Yeah. And so, so to me, the fact that already they are backpedaling on all this, even as they are depending on trying to win Georgia, right? They're wanting to win Georgia, these Senate seats. They're still immediately talking about, the fact that we lost some seats in the House is because of progressive people, even though there's no evidence for that. And
it's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
And AOC has talked about this a lot. I mean, every single person that backed Medicare for All won their seat. A lot of these idiot Democratic candidates that lost had like zero social media presence, zero ability to get out and pound the pavement and talk to the full range of working class people. But this is what the Democrats do, right? And they pound on people to the left. They're very happy that John Kasich is in their camp now. But they're mad that people on the left are now actually wanting to try to hold their feet to the fire, and immediately they're like, "No, let's get out the giant fire hose and put out the fire."
Yeah, this has happened before. It's like, we'll hold them to their feet to the fire after they're elected. Then it's like, well, they're not in office yet, so you got to wait to see what they do. Then it's still early. They're trying their best. They have to undo all the bad stuff the previous guy did. And then it's like, well, and just kind of kicks down. And then by the time people start getting upset, then it's like, well, right now the most important thing is getting them in a second term, because we don't want this going to the Republicans. Right. So you can't criticize him too much, or it's going to take away his mojo and he won't get reelected. This is just always happens. It's why our two-party system sucks. It's why this sort of constant shaming to fall in line may work short term, but long term it only hurts, because this sort of voter shaming to make sure you always back the Democrat. And yes, I understand that this election was higher stakes. I voted for Biden. I get all that. But this happens every time. And so the Democrats keep shifting over to try to like scoop up some of the Republicans, and then the Republicans get to keep going for the right. Yeah. This is the end game of our American experiment. If we keep going down this road, we're going to die sooner than we'd like. So we need to really take some bigger risks than we have been.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those that don't believe it, all you have to do is look at the first 2 years of the Obama presidency. I mean, the Democrats had all of the houses of government. Right? Democratic Senate, Democratic House, Democratic presidency.
Huge mandate.
Huge mandate.
Yeah.
People were fired up. What happened? Basically nothing.
The auto industry was bailed out.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Bigger cars.
Wall Street.
Oh, phew. Okay. Sorry.
There was a troop surge. I remember protesting within the early days of the Obama administration because there was an Afghanistan troop surge of 30,000 troops. Yeah. And so a lot of the younger radicals took to the street, tried to shut down the streets. This isn't a new tactic. It's been going on for a long time. And the older peace and justice activists were not involved because they still believed this dream of that Obama represented was too powerful for them to start putting pressure. And so I got criticism for protesting troop surge by elderly peace activists. This is what happens. Like there's all sorts of psychology. We're being gamed. This is the other piece of it. Like we're not evolved for really super complex social thinking, right? And so when we feel like we know Joe Biden because we see his face all the time. And so we want to be nice to him like we're nice to anyone else. And so if I'm critical of Biden, you might feel attacked, like I'm criticizing a nice guy. And we need to step back and say, no, Joe Biden might be an individual person who's nice, but he represents an apparatus that we need to have a lot of angst and fire towards. And so if we hold back criticisms because we need to somehow be nice, like there's all kinds of crap going around that makes it hard for even people who we agree on policies, holding back any pressure. So like this whole feet to the fire thing, I feel like it's just a dismissal. Like when you say, we'll deal with that later, we're going to have to, then we'll hold his feet to his fire. To me, it's like a parent saying, wait until Christmas. And that Christmas never comes.
All right, a couple more comments, and then we'll get back to the squad comment.
I think it is fascinating that people are still afraid of offending Trump. He may not be president, but might retain some sort of political power. Gus responds, he's going to be a major player in the GOP, even if not active for decades. He's the new Reagan for a lot of people, like in what he represents, a seismic shift in the emphases and priorities of the Republican Party. We've seen a huge shift in a way that like creates the perfect storm. Trump and Reagan were at odds with some stuff, but if you add those together and you could create a new candidate out of that, then we'll have it could get really nasty.
No, I mean, look, Trump himself and other people are already talking about him running for president in 2024. Now, I mean, he may be too old and sick.
He'll be a jar in a robotic body, like a brain in a jar with a robotic body. Yeah.
Right. He may be a really big robotic bird. Like he could be like the emu of robotic birds. I mean, I know it's an insult to emus, but since they're all robots, it doesn't really
stands.
Yeah. Okay.
CK, right. So what we're looking forward to is a Biden-Obama 2.0 where the Republicans won't let anything happen. Well, and some Democrats colluding.
Right. And the Democrat, I mean, that's the point, is that this is always the excuse, right? I mean, it's really a great game, right? So, behind the scenes, what you have to keep in mind, and this is the systemic piece, behind the scenes, these folks are all the same people, right? I mean, they're on the same boards, they're on the same, corporate controlling systems. They all support and are on the boards of the same international economic controlling systems. They all are friends. They all know each other. They all show up at the same things. And their desire is to keep that corporate economic status quo. That's the desire. That's the true aim. That's the true goal. And so then what they do, though, in the public face is they just play each other off of each other, right? So the Democrats can always say, oh, well, if we could, we'd do all this progressive stuff. But it's just those bad Republicans are keeping us from there. And that's why I bring up the beginning of the Obama administration, because they could have done all of that. And they didn't. They didn't do any of it. So I think Mark, as you're always saying, complex social thinking. I think we need to get beyond the games that we're being fed, and really start to think, okay, if we're hearing the same arguments all the time, but the trajectory of where society is heading always seems to be kind of the same trajectory, like maybe the lines that we're being fed aren't accurate. Maybe there's something more behind that.
There's a lot of wisdom from activists about, Bayard Rustin saying the only weapons we have are our bodies. We may need to tuck them into places so the wheels don't turn. Figuring out where we can put what sticks can we poke into which spokes to stop the machinery, and we have to be a little more cutthroat. I mean, I don't mean literally. I'm not advocating violence, but we have to be much more aggressive. And let's rewind. I'm going to keep harping on this probably for the next 10 years. We saw in the wake of George Floyd's murder at the hands of the police department, an uprising, a small uprising on the scheme of things, but significant enough to scare the shit out of people and cause similar reactions elsewhere. Not because of George Floyd's uniqueness, but because it was like, yet again, this has happened yet again, and people were stuck in a pandemic and kind of erupted. And the fear of what that caused pushed legislators and city council people to start considering things they never would have. That kind of reaction doesn't come from being like sending lots of letters, sternly written letters, or appealing to the better angels of our nature. That comes from showing that what leverage you have and pressuring them so that they're like, wait, I like money, but this scares me more than my need for having another billion. So I'm going to play it safe here. That's what we have to figure out, what the ways that we can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what holding feet to the fire looks like. It's more like literal fire of an AutoZone than it is this just an abstract fire. CK writes, 160 years of the same two-party system. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results.
Yeah, Sirius had a comment up above.
DNC is a very abusive, nice guy version. It's like that TV series You, where that really nice guy turns into be a sociopathic killer. Sirius also writes, America is like a living cult. Americans don't seem to know what a kind, ethical, caring, and solution-oriented leader looks like.
Yeah, and so this is where we get back to this question about the squad and the holding feet to the fire, and also this issue about parliamentary systems versus the two-party system. So the progressive Democrats actually are at a place where they do have leverage to hold Biden's feet to the fire, and the leverage is the fact that the Democratic majority in the House is now going to be smaller, which means that there are enough progressive people in the House where if they went to Pelosi and said, look, we're not voting for anything unless we start to get some of these things that actually help people. And, we know what would happen, what the reaction would be. It would be this immediate abusive shaming, you're just giving in to the Republicans. You guys are just like Trump. If you're
not supporting the Democratic heir apparent or our agenda, then you're actually giving ammunition to the enemy.
Yeah, then you're evil, blah, blah, blah. And what we need to start doing, and what we need to have these people start doing, is pushing back against that bullshit and just calling it for what it is and saying, no, that's bullshit. You said you were going to listen to us. We gave you the White House. And now you need to actually give us something, and you need to go to war for our stuff, not for your stuff. But look, this does not get said enough. Nancy Pelosi is worth $450 million. She lives in a mansion on the hill in Pacific Heights. If you've ever been to San Francisco and been to Pacific Heights, I mean, it is like the wealthy of the wealthy place. You got these great views of the bay and the ocean, and these just freaking mansions up there. That person, by definition, cannot be for a progressive economic agenda. She can't be. She's, she's got too much to lose. And she obviously is not doing the things in her personal life that would indicate that she cares about a progressive agenda. And you cannot have this small cadre of people worth $500 million and up and also have a progressive economic agenda. So why is that not being pointed out? Well, it's not, because in the background, again, these folks are all part of the same system.
Yep. Catherine writes, Flamio, says Flamio. That's a Avatar: The Last Airbender reference for those who haven't watched that glorious show. Flamio to you, Catherine. Diana writes, Trumpism/authoritarianism is being narrowly averted. If it is being averted, I mean, we'll see what happens.
We hope.
Dominionist theology brought evangelicals to this power dance, deeply destructive, like a virus of the mind, instead of focusing on building collective power, vision, and power. Yeah, and this is the thing. We don't have to diminish the real threat of Trumpism and neo-fascism and the way it's growing to recognize that, like, there's something problematic with this two-party setup. And there's some other things that I think, like, practically, like at different levels, that we can be pushing. So one of the things, people keep talking about the Electoral College as though it's like this great idea, even people on the left of center. But if we can push at the state levels to get our states to sign up on this interstate pact to give all their votes to whoever wins the popular vote, then all of a sudden the popular vote begins to matter. And then there's other things like Maine having like proportional electors, local levels of ranked choice voting. Those all give more power to people, but then also make it so that there has to be more wheeling and dealing among people running left of center or the centrists to get what they want. And what we need and that might seem like gridlock to Americans because there's something clean about two parties versus having like a bunch of parties. But it's that wheeling and dealing that parties have to do with each other to make concessions that allow things like universal health care to become a reality. So at every level up, we need to fight for these sorts of proportional sorts of representative things, ranked choice. And that allows possibility of things like a third party coming into play, which I think would be good. We can't be afraid of third parties anymore.
Well, and yeah, we don't have a parliamentary system, but if you even, let's say, got 10 people in the House of Representatives that were, let's say, from the Green Party or whatever progressive party it could be, that could be a very powerful block in a situation where you basically have a 50-50 split between the two main parties. And there's plenty of votes out there. I mean, there's plenty of people that's, even with this, great turnout, 60 million people didn't vote approximately. So you still have plenty of people to work with. And, we always talk about this issue of imagination. And I think this is where, the list of things that you just said and really realizing how these numbers are working and set up, we just need to have a lot more imagination about this. And we need to be willing to get the shame crap from the Democrats and just say, no, I'm not listening to that. I'm not bending to that. And we need to push through that to something else.
And I've already alluded to this, but another area we pull his feet to the fire, like, we got to stop criticizing people further to our left who seem too extreme. Like stuff, we talked a lot about this, about how protests happened after George Floyd, and people would pivot all the time. And there was a lot of shaming, and that shaming of people taking to the streets actually fueled the situation we're in now, where it somehow seems the most reasonable thing for Biden to have Republicans in his cabinet. Like,
right.
So, and that part of that comes from people that are listening who might think of yourself as kind of progressive, but somehow prefers having things be civil than having uncivilized protesters who are angry about police murder. Like, we have to be a little bit more willing to be uncivil. I'm going to put it that way. And we got to break this stranglehold civility has over the democratic imagination and realize that there's too much at stake to be polite. With the environment, with death, police death, with concentration camps on the border, all this stuff happening. It's just, we can't just be polite and think that we can woo people with kindness at the governmental level. That's not how it works.
Well, and the pandemic.
Pandemic.
We're going to have 10,000 people dying a week within a couple of weeks. And that's all because of our complete dysfunctionality of our national government. And so it's like, at what point, what is the cost of politeness? What is the cost of politeness? Is that an okay cost? It's not okay for me, but it seems to be okay for most white people and most of the people who are in this big, as we like to talk about, the extreme middle, right? The middle is not extreme. The middle is very extreme.
There's a lot of death dealt out in order to maintain the middle. Sirius writes, we, the left, need to invest in building and developing leaders with a sense of responsibility and secure attachment who are skilled at sharing power and resources with a rooted sense of self. Otherwise, we can't do needed clean blows to our adversaries. I think it's all right. And it's not rewarded. Like, some of the best leaders we have are just often getting thrown under the bus because they're not power brokers at the level that they work on a different sense of power. So we need to encourage more of that and stop stop this addiction we have.
Yeah, and a lot of serious what you're getting at here, and you talked about when you were on the show. There's all, and this is where this issue of getting beyond the shaming. There's so much internalized self-hatred among leaders on the left and people who have been oppressed, and it really is important to do that work, to heal that and get out from under that, so that you really can help to develop healthy communities and that have a lot of power. And again, if you look at the history of a lot of spiritual communities, they started small and had no power, but they did that. And then those people became very powerful, and those groups became very powerful in terms of helping those who are downtrodden in their societies.
Gus writes, Jacobin magazine had a really great piece in the summer edition I recommend called Two Paths of Democratic Socialism, Coalition and Confrontation. You can find it online on how voting within the Democrats could look. And this is a thing. There are kind of two schools among, like, the DSA, for example, Democratic Socialists of America, work within the Democratic Party. And there's a logic to that, but it only goes so far because there's no threat. There's less threat if you're working within the party. And so there is an argument to be made for outside creating other parties because then it's threatening. It's going to harp on this. Like, powerful people don't change unless they're threatened.
Yeah.
They have to feel like they're going to lose something unless they give in. That's just how it works.
Right.
There's no magic. Like, you can't sprinkle Gandhi and magic and this reflect back on them how bad they are. And they're like, you're right, I'm horrible, I'm going to change. That's not why Gandhi had success, or Dr. King, or these civil rights leaders who were nonviolent. It wasn't based upon love, compelling them with love only. The love has a place. It motivates and inspires people to be a part of the movement, but the powerful give up when they're threatened. That's just kind of how it works. Patricia writes, let's get rid of Pelosi. We want a more balanced speaker leader who can better understand and empathize with those in need. I'd be all for having someone who way more progressive and of the people than Pelosi.
Yeah, can you imagine if Ilhan was the speaker?
Oh my God.
That would be so awesome.
My father would just have a stroke right there.
Yeah, we could probably.
I guess I shouldn't joke about my almost 80-year-old father having a stroke, but
Yeah. Metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically, yeah. Gus writes, Maine and Vermont also allow folks currently incarcerated. I think that's another piece.
Yeah, to vote.
Look at who's not allowed to vote in your state and put pressure. I feel like this is why the Republicans, probably more than any other single factor, have been able to cling on to power, even though most people don't agree statistically with their policies. It's because they are masters at gaming at the state level.
Yeah.
And Democrats, we don't really do that as well. They do an excellent ground game. Everything from public radio into rural America to state
Christian
legislatures
radio,
who get to then do all the gerrymandering they want, put their people in these sort of, like we talk about, they like talking about the deep state, but the deep infrastructure of our political system is at the state level. And that's where the Republicans kind of have a lot of power.
Yeah.
They get to decide the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, why isn't there a cool, progressive, left-wing theological radio in every county in America? There's at least 5 conservative Christian radio stations in every county in America. And it's because but they were pathetic.
They were very pathetic.
Keep going.
This is where, like, I'm going to just put this out there. This is where, like, conservative talking point about liberals kind of leaning too elite has a point, because to listen to the people like Rush Limbaugh is an asswipe, but he talks more like how people talk.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a saltiness to him, and you can have left salty. That's not mean. I don't like listening to, yes, I'm highly educated, so I care about education.
You don't want to listen to the ontological reflection on the groundness of being impacting our very essence, while the epistemology of the Trinitarian doctrine is espoused. No.
Yeah. I mean, this is the left needs to embrace populism, and there's a rich history of left populism that is worker, people of the land. It's just more salty, and we need to embrace that instead of saying, well, someone from Harvard with a PhD knows best, that's thinking is rife, and we need to challenge that. We don't have to be anti-intellectual about it. Jeremy writes,
we're way over time, so let's blaze through.
Jeremy writes, is there a way to get both? Can we get a system that works for everyone and some sort of national unity?
No. That's a good question.
I think we have to work.
I mean, look,
unity comes later.
Or again, I mean, Europe has a lot of that stuff, right? I mean, national unity doesn't need to mean that everybody likes each other, but let's just get universal health care. Like, that's fine. You can
once it's in, it's hard to get taken away, and it becomes normalized. So, like, they have good health care in Canada, but they also have people who are as far right as we have here.
Yeah.
But they're not going to get taken away. So, like, I think you have to sometimes give people what's best for people as a whole, the common good, and not try to please everybody all the time. But it's a hard road for sure.
Yeah.
Gilbert writes, we will find out how much leverage we really have. I'm skeptical that we have much of anything but hope. I'm wrong. We'll see. And I think we have to be willing to use all the tools at our disposal. CK writes, fascist party, extreme centrist party, and the new POC squad party seem like we have a 3-party system. I mean, the makings are there, but the infrastructure for these parties is huge. Like, they hold the pocketbooks. And so there's something to be said about, like, it's why the squad has less power than they could have is because the DNC actually has been trying to undermine them. So that's not 2 parties within a party.
Yeah.
Diana writes, I've spent 35 years as a grassroots community organizer. From the theological roots of John Lewis, it's really hard to hear y'all critique Nancy Pelosi. She has good skills and experience. Many factions need each other. Grateful to her. I see that it's really a big tent in leadership development. No more circular firing squads. Well, I disagree.
No.
I think she's outlived her usefulness in terms of being able to bring the Democratic Party forward in the way it needs to go. No. And you can say we all need different factions, but they're acting like they don't need progressive faction, and that's a huge problem in this stage of our civilization.
Yeah, the mainstream Democrats have been continually shitting on the progressives now for the last about 6 years. Well, longer than that, but obviously, for the last 6 years. So, all right. Oh, we're way over time now.
Last word from Catherine. Maybe this is silly, but could we create a leftist party and just call it all something else? It feels like there is enough precedent for the establishment throwing self-identified socialists and anarchists under the bus in jail that we could take a leaf from the right's playbook and just trick some people into seeing the reasonableness of our platform by calling it something else.
Yeah, I actually wrote a 4-part blog post on this a few months back about getting rid of some of these terms and coming up with some new ones. I think it's not a bad idea. The terms are pretty old. Nobody really knows what they mean anyway, and they just get thrown around all these weird ways. So it might be interesting to experiment with that.
It gets really complex because people that are really invested in those lineages, I mean, that's how they've self-identified in kind of like small factions for 100, maybe 100 years even. So they're always going to talk like that. So there has to be a way of creating a tent for kind of radical ideas, but then not having Republicans say, aha, look, see, this guy who's the head of the Socialist Party is part of that group, and so they're all socialists. So there's a lot of problems. So I think there's a two-pronged attack, like the Bernie Sanders, like normalizing socialism has a lot of merit. But then also we have to find new ways that are more compelling and straightforward for people too, who are turned off by phrases.
Yeah.
Whoops, didn't mean to imply there's the right is reasonable, but they definitely do trick people by calling stuff other stuff. They're crafty, and we have to be crafty.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for hanging in there with us. We've run over longer than usual, and we appreciate all of you. And we'll be back tomorrow. And hopefully, Doctors Without Borders will not be with us. So
We'll see.
We'll see.
See y'all.
Bye.